have a banking background. So I was in finance for a long time.
Yeah.
I actually worked in risk. But I had such an interest on impact that I started to do a lot of work on social risk and climate finance. And one thing that I've embedded is to make sure that every country that I visit, I go and plant trees in their communities. This is also a way to offset my carbon footprints with the flying that's happening.
But we should be having more young people speaking at policy level.
Let's empower young people to actually create jobs, to be entrepreneurs. But how do we do that? We need to also train them. We need to look at how do we change our education system so they just, it's not a curriculum where you're taught how to memorize. Afterwards, you graduate, you have to look for a job. If there's no job, okay, what's next?
Tonight, we bring you an extraordinary individual whose dedication, passion, and impact transcend age and borders. The African Union Special Envoy on Youth, Chido Mpemba, is a beacon of hope for the continent's youth, leading the charge in representing over 870 million voices across 55 African countries. Yes. Hello and welcome to Globe Traktion with me, Pasil Telewa. In this episode, I host a climate reality leader and a Mandela Washington Fellow alumni, Chido Mpemba, on her inspiring path to leadership, her groundbreaking initiatives, and her unwavering commitment to empowering the next generation of African leaders. I hope you enjoy her story. Hey, Chido.
Hi.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too.
Do you have people still call you Cleopatra?
Oh yes, some call me Cleo, some call me Chido.
Welcome, Cleo.
Thank you.
Please
Thank you
have
for
a
having
seat.
me. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
So great to be here.
It's so nice having you.
Thank you.
How was your flight?
My flight was good. At least it was quite short, coming from Addis Ababa.
You're coming from Addis.
Yeah.
And soon you'll be catching another one for over 8 hours.
Oh,
And
yes.
I can't imagine.
Yes.
I hope traveling is one of your hobbies, by the way.
I am actually a fan of travel
So
because
you're enjoying it?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it because you get to learn different cultures, you get to meet different people. And with the constituency that I represent, the young people, it's important that you engage with them. When I actually got into office, the very first thing I did was embark on a listening tour. I thought it was very important that if I'm going to represent
You
the
need
voices
to know
of the youth.
who you're representing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's been quite exciting with the travel. I also get to learn in terms of, what young people are faced with in their communities. Because at times we take for advantage that whilst I'm sitting in office and everyone knows what we're doing at the African Union, everyone knows about Agenda 2063. But we also have people in marginalized communities.
Who got no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
So how do you reach this kind of people?
I reached them by actually physically going there, which was actually the purpose of the listening tour. And I realized that, in as much as we can engage virtually, we can engage on the sidelines of these big meetings, but we also have the young people that are in rural villages. We have the young people that are doing amazing work within their countries.
They got no access to internet. They know nothing.
So no access to internet, no access to information. So when I went to Ghana, actually, my very first listening tour was in Ghana. We had an opportunity to visit a community, a marginalized community of young women and girls that are victims of early teenage pregnancy. And I also got to learn about, some of the experiences they've been faced with. And now they've created like a cooperative just to economically empower themselves whilst they sell shea butter. But now because of me being physically there, I'm able to share the story.
And it creates some difference,
I
presume.
It does.
It's now close to 2 years, since you took up that role. How are you finding it generally?
It's been good. It's also great to see the progress over the things that we've been lobbying for and advocating for in this office. I officially resumed office last year, March. So the announcement was November 2021. But if you may recall, during that time, there was just so much going on, including COVID. And eventually I moved to Addis Ababa in March. And since then, we've seen a lot of progression on, the work we've been embarking on, engaging with young people, looking at their priorities, but most importantly, to make sure that we set the foundation of this role in this office.
And you're the youngest, diplomat in the cabinets of the chairpersons of AU. So tell me, how does that feel? And the fact also that you're a female. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll be honest, as women, especially being women, being African,
being
young, And then you find yourself sitting there on the 19th floor and you look at everyone else who's been in the African Union for many years and mostly male. But I think what I appreciate is that I also got to learn from them, from their experiences, and they also get to learn from me. You know, with young people, we come with innovation, what we've experienced now in our time. So it's really been a learning curve where we get to dialogue and exchange through intergenerational co-leadership. Not only that, because, I mean, youth and women are the chairperson's priorities. So also getting to translate his vision and, you know, what he would like to see happen for the women and youth across Africa. I remember our very first meeting when I got appointed. He said to me, you know what? I know you're literally in this role and advocating for the youth for Africa as one of his priorities, but at the same time, let's not forget the marginalized communities, which is also came with that idea that I spoke about the listening to and going to communities, because it's very passionate that, you know, we do not leave out the marginalized. I've also been privileged that even within this role, we get to work with departments. We already have different departments with the Women, Gender, Youth Directorate that focus on the programming, and we get to then make sure that we collaborate our efforts for better impact, as well as the member states across Africa too.
Now, how does that happen, you know, for your appointment to take place? Is there like, you know, a secret ballot, or how does it happen for you?
Okay, so I'll speak, because, you know, it's a fairly new role, but maybe I'll speak more on my experience and how that process went about. So first of all, they did send to member states indicating that this role was now open, and I believe that through the member states and the ministries of youth, young people then got to, you know, indicate their interest and, you know, have those interests, you know, in their CVs passed on to the African Union. But they also made it open and on the website. And in my case, what actually happened is I saw it on the website and later on then found out that through my country as well, they had sent some nominations and some CVs of young people that are interested. But at the time it was too late. And I just said, you know what, let me just try, because it's something I'm passionate about that I really want to focus on. And, you know, after that, of course, with a number of other young people, they got hold of me and indicated to say, okay, we've seen your application and you're shortlisted, and you come up with a manifesto. So you have to come up with a manifesto to say what you would do if you get into office.
What your plan is.
What your plan is. So I came up with a manifesto. I had to present it to a committee, and this committee also included excuse me, the regional economic communities, the RECs, so, you know, the regional economic communities for Southern Africa, for SADC, for, you know, East Africa, West Africa, and, you know, a committee that was put together. And from there, you know, through that process and, you know, them making their recommendations, that's when I was then told that, you know, I'd been selected for the role, and of course the chairperson had also received these recommendations, to which led to the final decision.
I'd like to know, who was Chido before that particular appointment?
Well, interesting enough, I have a banking background. So I was in finance for a long time. I worked at Standard Chartered Bank for 7 years. In fact, I used to come to Kenya quite a lot. So, you know, I have a heart for Kenya, because I used to come to Kenya quite a lot within my role. You know, I worked in Zimbabwe, but also worked very closely within Southern Africa and with my colleagues here in East Africa, and Kenya being our hub. And, you know, during the time I was in the bank, I actually worked in risk. But I had such an interest on impact that I started to do a lot of work on social risk and climate finance. And as a result of that, I started, you know, studying more on it, applying for different fellowships. And then at some point I went to the USA under the former president of the US, Al Gore, who came up with an initiative called the Climate Reality Project. And I was trained as a climate reality leader. And, you know, with that, I just always went back to my organization, in as much as I was strictly in risk and finance. But I used to always want to use that experience that I get when I go on these fellowships back at home. You see, and then, you know, I went to the Mandela Washington Fellowship. I came back, and I remember saying to a CEO of Standard Chartered Bank, you know, I'd like to start an initiative on financial literacy and go around training girls. When I came back from the Climate Reality initiative from the, you know, President Al Gore, I started training young girls in schools, and I started, you know, planting fruit trees and just teaching them more about climate change. But within my role, embedding it into climate risk as well, looking at, you know, the impact of climate risk on the work that we did, specifically through funding as well, because specifically my department was focused on, you know, providing funding to and credit to big organizations. But then I had an interest to say, okay, but how, in terms of the environmental factors, how is that going about? And just saying that, then I became even more curious to say, okay, if I'm doing work on climate change or financial literacy, what else is out there? And, getting exposed to different communities and realize that there's so much that we can all give and do as individuals.
True.
That led to the big decision I made. I left my job in December 2019.
You tendered your resignation.
Yes.
How
yes.
did your boss react to that?
Well, I remember my boss looked at me and said, you know what, I know you've been in finance and risk, but everyone in the bank knows that you probably have another destiny. Because I used to do a lot of work outside of this, and I used to volunteer in different communities within Standard Chartered, even globally, to the extent that at some point I was actually invited to a London office to work on a, social impact initiative based on the work that they'd seen I was doing.
Yeah.
And, because I used to make sure, obviously, that I put it up within even our network across Standard Chartered. So I decided to leave. And also just to say, so it wasn't necessarily a resignation, it's just that at the time there was also a retrenchment package ongoing.
So it came at the right time.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to volunteer myself for retrenchment. But of course, there were mixed feelings. I mean, we did that, but of course, others are saying, are you really sure you're doing this? You're still young.
What about
you take
the
a retrenchment package,
yeah.
You're still young. And I said, well, because I'm still young, that means that I've got other opportunities. If it's a mistake, then I have other opportunities to correct my mistakes. So I still have a long way to go. So I left in 2019. And then from there, I'm like, okay, actually, I don't have a plan per se. I have a passion, but I don't have in terms of, looking forward. Because, of course, as you grow older, you're also looking at, how do I sustain myself?
Income? Yeah.
How do I get income?
Yeah.
So I remember I actually came to Nairobi. Funny enough, I came to Nairobi for a bit. After that, I was there for like 2 months.
Yeah.
Took some time out. And at the time, I continued with all my voluntary work. So I was still doing the climate change, going to volunteer in financial literacy. And I used to actually organize town hall meetings. And within these town hall meetings, I used to bring in young people and policymakers from the ministers in Zim. The very first one we actually brought the president. So I still continued with that.
Yeah.
So it then so happened that at the time, I then reached out to our Minister of Youth and I said, you know what, I'd like to give you feedback on the town hall that we've held in 2020 because she didn't manage, we sent an invite, but she didn't manage to attend due to another commitment outside the country. So, we got organized, went with my team, and I was like, look, this is my name. I'm just here to let you know we're at this town hall. These are the outcomes. Oh, and I came with a tree because we're advocating for climate change. So we want to make sure that you also plant this tree. And, at that meeting, and the next day I got a call from the office and they said, the minister would actually like to meet with you again. I'm like, oh, with me? And she was interested to know as well, and, okay, so what exactly are you doing? What do you do? Yeah. And I just mentioned, I've actually just left my job. I'm just spending time giving back to communities. And she said, okay, so we should definitely work together. So we just started working on different initiatives together. And sadly at the time, that's when COVID happened. So I remember the coincidence is that I don't come from the big city in Harare. I come from the second capital city in Bulawayo in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, in Zimbabwe, yeah.
Yeah, so it happened that I'd gone on an assignment, which I was working on with the Minister of Youth in Bulawayo, and then the lockdown started. But the beauty of it is that I got to be with my parents because they live in Bulawayo and, we're in the hospitality industry and, I'm also involved in the family business and that aspect. So I also got to be home, got to check, okay, how are we doing on the hospitality side? And then now there's a lockdown and it's so quiet and it's just the three of us. I'm like, okay, this is actually an opportunity just to bond. And we continued. It gave us an opportunity, even with the work I was doing with the minister. We created another initiative called the United Program for Artists and Athletes in Zimbabwe.
Wow.
Because we realized that they had been affected the most by COVID-19. So again, I was working on that project, making sure that, we really are there for mostly young people.
Them,
and be there for them. And, I continued with that. After that, opening doors for more opportunities for consultancy, to volunteer. And at the time this role came, I was also doing some work with the World Economic Forum. And this was under their Global Shapers community, which is like a initiative of the World Economic Forum. And I got an opportunity to join a steering committee where, they were looking at their 10 years of impact and how to redesign their, impact areas.
That means you're doing a lot of community work for you to come on board. And it's great that you came on board with, you know, a whole lot of experience and you understand your own community. We're talking about you representing, you know, over 870 million youths across 55 countries. How do you plan for that? And how do you make sure that, you know, you don't leave any serious matters, you know, on the side?
You know, what I would say is there's so many issues at hand that young people are faced with, from high unemployment, migration issues to education. I tell you, it's a lot. And for one person, it's a lot. And as a result of that, I realized that I also had to work with people. And by working with people, this means working with the member states themselves, because the member states are part of the African Union. And our role as the African Union Commission is to execute on behalf of our member states. Had to make sure that I also work with youth groups. They're amazing young people doing so much work, including even here in Kenya. What I've realized is that we also have to be proactive, but at times we have to be reactive, because constantly everything is changing. At times there's peace and security. You know, there are a lot of coups that are going on. How does that affect young people? You know, of course, I have my priorities as a political appointee. I came in and I said, these are my priorities. But first of all, what is my engagement strategy? Okay, I would like to actually go on the ground. I do the listening tours in a format where it starts with a youth town hall meeting. That's like a youth engagement tool. The second tool I use is community engagement, where I visit the different communities. And the final is policy and political engagement. And with the final part of these listening tours, I then get to talk to the policymakers, be it the ministers, at times be it the head of states. So I had to take that approach to say, okay, through this engagement tool, we look at what exactly are the key priorities of youth at the moment, which we get to hear from them. And at the same time, what is happening around us that we also need to respond to. And not all one size fits all. You know, if you go to Madagascar, for instance, in June when Madagascar, exactly, you know, they also have their own challenges, be it, you know, gap on digital skills and stuff like that. But it also helps me to make sure that even when decisions are being made, assembly decisions of the African Union, you get to also lobby, understanding what is currently at hand. Not only that, but I also advocate for the African Union Youth Charter.
Oh, great.
If you may allow me just to tell you a bit of the African Union Youth Charter, because everything I'm talking about...
I think I heard that you're trying to ratify it. So tell me about the charter, by the way.
Yeah, so you know with the charter, this was signed in 2006.
Look at you, you're so political already.
Imagine
tell
with
me
the
about
private
the
sector,
of the
you know? So you know, with the ratification of the Youth Charter in 2006 in Punjab, our head of states in Africa got together and they said, you know what, we need to do more for young people. And they came up with this charter as a treaty to say this is how, as countries, that we abide and we commit and we promise we'll use to come up with our national youth policies, as well as how we engage with young people. So for instance, when you look at Article 11 of the African Union Youth Charter, it talks about creating platforms for young people at the decision-making table at national, regional, and continental level. But now what happens with this charter is that in as much as that happened, there are two elements. The first element is not all member states have signed it or ratified it. So far we're 15 countries, 15. So part of my role is when I even go to these listening tours, I'm lobbying these countries to say, can you sign on and commit to the Youth Charter? Recently, this year in February, we had Burundi being the latest to sign the Youth Charter, and the president of Burundi actually came to deposit the Youth Charter at the African Union, where I had held a youth town hall meeting at the AU Head of States meeting. And we noticed after that, a number of member states also came forward where they've been approaching the office to say, hey, we'd actually like to ratify it. So what you find at times is that because there's so many conflicting priorities, you know, which is also the reason for my role to make sure that the Youth Charter is not forgotten. Because what we found in those conversations, the member states were saying, you know what, after we saw Burundi, we also went to check and realized we haven't ratified it.
Have you done enough sensitization to ensure that these countries can come on board and, you know, sign the charter? So why is it taking so long then?
I hear you. I think it's a matter of advocating, as I indicated, because in as much as a youth charter, they're also looking at, for instance, AFCFTA. This year, our theme of the year being the AFCFTA, being the Africa Free Continental Free Trade Agreement area, right? And because of that, you can imagine once you're focusing on, you know, that protocol, at the same time we have the, you know, Charter on Free Movement of Persons, which is also a priority. So you constantly have to lobby and say, wait a minute, whilst you also have those conflicting commitments, don't forget about the Youth Charter. And you find that, as you mentioned about sensitization, again, making sure that people really understand, even young people themselves, to help to advocate and lobby for this to be signed as well. But we also shouldn't forget that it's not just about the signing. So, you know, earlier this year in June, we had our meeting with the ministers of youth, and it's called an STC meeting, which is the Specialized Technical Committee meeting.
I think
so
I
now
attended
specifically,
that meeting.
oh, were you there?
I did.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
That's lovely. So, you know, with the one for the ministers of youth, we're very happy because they hadn't met in 4 years. And it means that if they're not meeting, we cannot pass our decisions because they'll go through the STC, and from the STC, they go to the assembly. So that also gave us an opportunity, again, because of the listening tours. Before the listening tours, I actually, you know, launched a survey. So the first survey was to say, okay, what are the priorities you'd like me to focus on as young people? From there, the listening tours and etc. So I had an opportunity to then present that to the ministers of youth, and then also presented what I was requesting for on behalf of young people as decisions for their consideration. We spoke about the Youth Charter to say more sensitization, and for them, even as the ministers in those countries, to make sure that their countries ratify the Youth Charter. The second thing we thought about, and what I'd proposed based on my conversations with young people too, was to say, how are we monitoring the implementation of the Youth Charter? So we need to make sure that there's a monitoring and review mechanism that's put in place so we can report back on the progress that's coming from this. The third thing was to say this Youth Charter was signed in 2006. That's already over 13 years, right? Things have changed.
True.
The current realities, we didn't even have COVID then. So how do we make sure that it's also current? And the decision that came out of that request was to say, okay, we're going to have added mechanisms to the Youth Charter to make sure that it also meets the realities of young people today. And through these processes, of course, first, you know, we're still, mobilizing, advocating rather for the ratification. But on top of it, we need to also make sure we review and see how it's been implemented. And in addition, adding more mechanisms to it. That way it's sustainable. It looks into institutional reforms of the African Union too.
It's actually a lot of work at your office to do. And besides the ratification of that charter, I'd like you to take me through how are you ensuring that we have, we alleviate poverty within our young people? Because I don't know if your office has been keen on that, but poverty is not something you can ignore when it comes to, African youths. It has stopped us from getting, access to quality education, good jobs, all of that. So tell me about it.
Okay, I think first of all, we need to establish the root cause. What is the reason is the poverty? And I think one of the elements is because of, economic development or the lack of thereof, the progress of economic development in, various countries in Africa. Then we also look at, okay, what is the lack of the economic development in the various countries in Africa? One of them could be because there are no jobs. So people are not working and money is not circulating. Then you look at, okay, what is the reason that there are actually no jobs? Again, we look at our education system because a lot of young people have gone to school. We have graduates, but they don't have jobs. At times, it's skill mismatch. And again, at times, it's because there are not a number of jobs that are enough of the young people and the graduates that we have each and every year. Then you have to look at that and say, okay, so what can we do to make sure we mitigate this? Okay, I was in risk. I always think about how do we mitigate.
I know. You're sounding like the actual person I need to be talking about this.
You know, so how do we mitigate that? Okay, we need to look back and say, if there are no jobs available, we need to create them. So let's empower young people. Let's empower young people to actually create jobs, to be entrepreneurs. But how do we do that? We need to also train them. We need to look at how do we change our education system so they just, it's not a curriculum where you're taught how to memorize. Afterwards, you graduate, you have to look for a job. If there's no job, okay, what's next? We create the jobs. And by, upskilling our young people, we're able to do that. But we also need to realize that it's not about creating the jobs and them having the skill only. They need the funding. And we all hear this, that young people are not bankable. We don't have access to credit. That comes out a lot.
Also there's the issue of when you go out for credit, you're asked for a collateral.
Exactly.
Where do you get that from?
And the funding and the lies. So there's so much to address in this regard. And when you look at the funding aspect, I'll give you one example. I remember last year at the AU Head of States meeting, the president of the African Development Bank announced that, they're going to have funding available to start youth investment banks in countries in Africa. And the reason of these youth investment banks is that they're youth friendly, they employ young people, and they're not as stringent when it comes to, you know, young people and having access borrowing and the likes. And so far, this has been launched in Liberia. Part of my role is also to advocate. I ask them, when I get every time I get an opportunity, I ask, okay, what is the progress on this? Are the countries also, you know, getting involved? Are the member states also pushing so that they also create these banks in their countries? You know, because it's a whole cycle, really.
It is.
If we look at AFCFTA, for instance, just a few days ago, I came from Lusaka, where, you know, we joined hands with the AFCFTA Secretariat and the Secretary General, Wamkele Mene, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, and we convened the AFCFTA Youth Symposium in Lusaka. Again, that was an opportunity for them to also hear firsthand. The last day was a youth town with the Secretary General, where he was answering questions from young people. And one thing he promised them was to say, you know, the next symposium is going to be different. Of course, the one we had, you know, young people are engaging, share best practices, they get to talk. There were also exhibitions. So that also helped young people from across the continent exhibiting what they're doing in their countries. And he said, the next one, we need to have deal rooms. So that when we're in these rooms, young people also get an opportunity to talk to, you know, potential investors, get to also break deals in that. But then again, we need to protect them when it comes to that. As I mentioned, it's a whole cycle of so many things. You know, I remember my first visit to Kenya, and I was having a meeting in the Ministry of Youth. And one thing they actually indicated was to say, because, you know, I was talking about how, you know, Kenya is so vibrant, the young people here are so entrepreneurial, and we also know even when it comes to technology, you know, it's one of the best.
It does.
You know,
does so well.
Yeah. And one of the challenges we're talking about was to say, you know, a lot of investors, as a result of that, are coming to Kenya, which is fairly fine. We have investors, international investors that are coming. But what then happens is when their businesses of the young people then get to progress, they buy them out. You know, they buy them out. And I remember I was talking to the Africa Business Council president, Dr. Mani from Egypt. We were talking about the same issue, and she was sharing with me about a young person she knows who had a brilliant business idea, but he didn't understand the investment terms. And when this business started doing well, they bought him out or they left him out of it, and he didn't even get a lot. So again, it goes back to financial literacy. It also goes back to our policies. How do you make sure that
I was about to say it goes to policy as well.
You know, policies. We need to make sure these policies are friendly to young people. If we're going to have people investing in the young people, that at least let there be a stake that remains with them.
Chido, I don't know if you've heard this phrase from, you know, your fellow young people, because you're pretty young yourself. But they worry about why should we over time keep talking about issues and we never implement. We keep talking and talking so that when the year starts, the year ends, we are talking about the same thing, no solution at all. How do you handle that? And where is it that you'll be proud to say, since you took office close to 2 years, perhaps you're getting somewhere? Tell me about that.
I totally hear you on that. Let me just I'll give a general example first, maybe specifically since I'm in Nairobi for the Africa Climate Summit. And one thing I was talking about and sharing with my fellow peers was to say, look, I mean, I'm going to engage, you know, with young people. We're going to be speaking. They're going to be the Nairobi Declaration, which is perfect with all these recommendations, which is, you know, a separate process, of course, with the Africa Climate Summit, which our Climate Change Department is handling. But then how about the action? Where's the action? Yes, we're talking about like where's the action, because we also need to lead by example by the action.
Exactly.
And you know, one thing that I've embedded is to make sure that every country that I visit, or when I get an opportunity in the countries that I visit, I go and plant trees in their communities. This is also a way to offset my carbon footprints with the flying that's happening. And then as a result, I said, if I'm going to come to Kenya, I can't leave without actually planting trees and inviting young people for us to plant trees together, because that's a climate action. That's actually the execution, because how do we mitigate climate change? Yes, I know even if the conference is focused on the financing bit, but we need to go back again to the root cause. Okay, what can we do and make a difference for? If I say what I'm really, really proud of as well, specifically even looking at this office, is number one, giving an opportunity for young people to actually form part and parcel of Agenda 2063. Because bear in mind, like you mentioned that, okay, everyone is talking, but you know, what is being done, right? But who needs to do it? Now, going back again, specifically within this office, one of the things we've also advocated for was the institutionalization of the office. Again, within the institutionalization of the office, because if an office is not institutionalized, then it's not permanent and it's not sustainable, you know, because it's an appointment to the chairperson. But then at the same time, we need to also make sure it's rotational. So even as I've been lobbying and advocating for this, I said, but let the role be rotational with, young people across the continent also getting an opportunity. And, through our request to the Ministers of Youth, this decision was passed and is now in the process. So from my end, what I decided to focus on, it being a new office, was also let's set the foundation first. Let's make sure we set the foundation first for sustainability. And I said, if that's the only thing I even get to do, it's fine. It means that it's also paved the way for the next person who will be coming. So, just to name a few, but specifically when it comes to foundations, what we've focused on is to make sure we set a firm foundation and push for the institutionalization too.
It's a lot happening, and I want to mention your recent award, top 100 under 40 most influential Africans. Congratulations on that.
Thank
tell
you.
me about what those 2 awards meant for you.
Thank you. So with that, the most influential people of African descent, that was last year September at the time.
Yes.
I had that last year September, and for me, of course, I'm humbled to say, okay, I'm just playing my role as a citizen and as a young person to do the best I can. But it's humbling to see people recognize it. But I also then see there's an opportunity to say, what can I learn from my peers that are also awarded? Because within this network, we have a lot of young people that are also being awarded for the work they're doing across the continent. So as part of this network of, people that have been awarded, let me also get to see my fellow nominees, what have they done? What can I learn? What can we teach each other? What is the best practice? How can we have more impact? And I found, most of the time, when that happens with awards, it also helps to create better impact when we see it and we view it that way. Yeah.
The issue of education and climate change is not something we can ignore. And even as you guys are planning to go ahead with the climate summit, we're still experiencing wildfires in places like Australia and those
so
kind of
bad.
places. But in Africa, there's something that we are so lucky to have. How do we guard, our resources? How do we ensure that we are, off the climate change crisis? From a risk manager's perspective, what is it that you're not doing right?
Okay. I wouldn't say what is it we're not doing right, but what can we do better? If you may allow me to speak about what we can do better.
Yeah.
What we can do better is to make sure that we speak with one voice. I think that's important. And we're already seeing with the Africa Climate Summit happening, Africans are saying, our head of state is saying, we want to come together, we want to have a common position and want to speak with one voice. And want to use that voice through the Nairobi Declaration to make sure that when it comes to the UN General Assembly, when it comes to COP28, we have a position as Africa. Now, last year at COP27, they were negotiating, the negotiations rather were focused on loss and damage. And that's what's actually impacting Africa the most. When it comes to our flooding in different countries and the likes, it affects, displacement of people, food security and the likes. And, looking at that, also, again, there's less funding that has been going towards loss and damage. But not only that, yet, as Africa, we actually, when it comes to our carbon footprints, we actually not even contributing a lot. I think it's like less than 3%. So we need to make sure it's fair game when it comes to, stuff like that. Because when it comes to carbon emissions as well, it's based on various stuff that's happening across globally. Yet it then affects everyone. So speaking with one voice, having one voice, advocating with that one voice, negotiating with one voice, and also the responsibility of young people. I'm saying young people because I'm used to working with young people, but the responsibility of every African citizen and responsibility of our countries to say, what are we also going to contribute to it? And I think this is a success with the Africa Climate Summit. If we're discussing climate finance, we're saying, okay, let's now come together as countries in Africa. What are we putting together to make sure that we really advocate this, which is something I'm really excited about as well, for that decision to happen with our leadership. And of course, as young people are saying, okay, as you say that, again, our job as young people is to be rebellious. So all is going to say, in as much as you're doing it, have you considered this? How are you considering young people? Which is why I also applaud the Africa Climate Summit and of course the Africa Climate Summit, but specifically I mean the Africa Youth Assembly.
Oh yeah.
With our lead coordinator Elizabeth, and I said that's wonderful that you had this idea, with young people to say, you know what, in as much as it's the main meeting, not every young person usually gets a chance to be in those rooms.
I was about to talk about young people being left out of the table, decision-making tables, and then they are called to just, come up, or rather, help you guys spearhead an idea that they have no idea about. So how do we actually, make sure these young people are in the room where these decisions are made, so that they are owning, whatever outcomes are coming from those meetings?
I think, again, because I like to go to the root cause, it also goes back to political participation of young people. When you look at our countries, who are actually being put into positions where they can influence and make decisions. I remember when it comes to COP27, we advocated and lobbied and said, can we have young people as part and parcel of the delegations going for COP27? But then in addition with that, how do we build their capacities? They need to be trained as negotiators, because if they just go and they're not trained,
they should know what they're going to do.
They should know what they're going to do. And if you look at this year, there's been a number of trainings on climate negotiation. Within the Africa Climate Youth Assembly, on the 2nd, after the tree planting, we're actually convening a workshop of our own to train young people.
Great.
And as a result of that, it even also positions us better, because when I go in a lobby and I say, put them in the delegations, they are trained. They know about this stuff. Not only that, but also we need young people interested to be in these positions. It's now not just about, we want to sit on the table, so we're going to find ways to sit on the table. If you want to sit on the table, be in the position to be on the table. It means it also go back to that. We now need more young people in these positions, because when they're in these positions, then they can also influence decision making. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to be in this role, because it also means that it came as a vision of the chairperson to say, wait a minute, when we sit in these rooms, we need a youth representative. So as a result, getting to sit in the AU head of states meetings, the statutory meetings, to represent that voice too. But of course, we need more, because normally when I'm in the room, I'm like, okay, I'm looking at the young people that are around. But having said that, there's been progress. We're seeing, I'll give an example of Namibia. Namibia is the youngest member of parliament, Patience Masol. Namibia is the youngest deputy minister of ITC. Is it ITC? ICT?
ICT.
Yeah, ICT, Not only that, but we have 4 countries that have since appointed youth presidential advisors. We have in Namibia, we have in Ghana, we have, okay, I'm trying to remember the other countries, I don't know if Uganda, but pretty much, again, even when I came from Lusaka, Zambia, we also have young people that are advising their head of states. I know we have Chipo, who's like the advisor for the president of Zambia on public policy. And if we look at Zambia now, I mean, they're in the process of moving from being a least developed country to a developing country. And we say, okay, we look at, young people are that. If we look at Burundi as well, they're changing. The president literally earlier this year reshuffled his cabinet and has young people from the spokesperson. In fact, they're the other country that have also, appointed a youth presidential advisor.
Now that you mentioned ITC for ICT, I'd like also to have, your overview about youth and technology, because you cannot talk about a youth representative and not pull in, a technology aspect and innovation into that. How is your office working on that? Or do you have any initiatives?
We do, actually. We launched a digital skills campaign in March this year. We've since taken it to 8 countries. And this is in partnership with Google, because we also believe that whatever we do should be a partnership, again, with the private sector and the public sector. So within this initiative, I mean, we just came back from Lusaka, where we trained over 200 young people on digital skills. And the whole idea, again, came from these surveys and, these listening tours, and realized that there's actually a gap that keeps coming up. When you look at Madagascar, when we did the research with my team, we realized that when you look at the youth with the least digital skills, Madagascar was coming up. As a result, we also went to Madagascar. Madagascar was the second country we launched this digital skills training through working with the ministries of ICT, ministers of youth, bringing Google on board, coming up with a specialized design training and training young people on the ground. And then I also got to visit youth-led tech hubs, because we saw that it's important. And again, with the theme of this year being, accelerating efforts of the AFCFTA, Continental Free Trade Agreement area, our target was also youth startups. How do they leverage in technology? How do they leverage on e-commerce? Again, bringing back the private sector, working as well. We're working with Afreximbank, because they have an e-payment system that they've launched. And I think right now it's in 4 countries. How do you make sure young people also get to benefit on that? That's number 1. There's another element too. how do we use technology for advocacy for some of these issues? So within this digital skills campaign, we focus on that. Tech to empower young people that are already in startup businesses. Tech to look at the future of work and the future of jobs. And tech to leverage on it for advocacy. And we believe it's very important. So again, we have more countries that are coming up. So far, we've done 8 in the few months since March, but definitely we want to take this across the continent. Just to say tech is now and tech is the future. And that's how we can also be on the global playfield. It's not just part of Africa. Like within my mandate and my strategy, I've said we also need young people on the global platforms. I remember last year, November, I got an opportunity to attend President Obama's forum. He has the Obama Leaders Fellows, and he had a forum and a town hall meeting in New York. And on the sidelines of that, I met with the Africa Obama scholars. And I remember one lady stood up and we're having a conversation, and she said in that room, I don't understand why we have to come all the way to
the US.
To the US to talk about what we can do, what we can develop. Why don't we just have our own meetings in Africa? And I remember when we had that conversation in the room, one thing we said was, but then we are made for the world, we're not made just for Africa. Yes, I understand we have our issues with Africa. It's also important we discuss them in Africa, which is why we even have the Africa Climate Summit. But at the same time, some of these issues, again, they contribute towards global development. And as a result of that, we also need to be on the global stage. We need to make sure when you talk about, our resources as Africa and, externalization, etc., we can only have those conversations on the global platform. We get to understand what's happening globally and how we can also benefit from it. Yes, I'm an African and proudly an African citizen first, but it also means, and it doesn't mean that I'm also a global citizen. So we should see ourselves as that. It's not that when you talk about global, it's just, the developed countries or the West and, okay, they should meet and we meet there. No, we're part of that global development, even if it means that maybe we're just a few years behind. But what we're aiming for is to also be fully developed. And we deserve to be on those platforms too.
Chido, as the youngest diplomat and a special envoy, please give us some advice, to your fellow youths.
Okay. I have so much to say.
Please make it very short because you don't have that time.
The thing. So okay, what advice can I give to young people? The advice I can give to young people is do not give up. Because I know it's hard. As a young person, it's so hard. With all the issues affecting, be it globally or at continental level, they affect young people the most because we're the largest demographic. But do not give up and never underestimate the impact that you can make. Because at times, some of us can only make impact at community level, at family level, but never think that it's too small. It's also contributing towards the future and the development of Agenda 2063 and the Africa that we want and the Africa that we are going to make sure we're a part of.
It's really nice seeing you, by the way.
Thank you.
We've been seeing you all over the globe, all over the continent, doing what you do best, and we're really proud to be associated with you.
Thank you so much. I'll say karibu sana.
Oh, you're doing well, actually. And for that reason, we thought we can give you a little something.
Oh, wow.
And I hope this can be a nice, youthful thing to don on your pair of denims while you're on your travels.
Thank you so much. This is so nice.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Can I actually put it on?
Yeah, please.
I need to see if it fits, huh?
And if it doesn't fit, don't worry, because there's something, right? Else?
Wow.
There is. Great.
Wow. I like this.
I hope
and it looks warm as well.
It is.
Yeah, it looks very warm.
You can let me know if you need some help.
Wow. Let me see. Let's see.
Look at you. Karibu,
it's very, thank you. Very, very warm.
Whatever.
I like it.
This is nice. Okay, I usually like it oversized. I don't know how you like your hoodies.
Yeah, I also like my hoodies
and then
oversized.
You can just drop in your passport here, when you're doing
you
your
have
travels.
it here. Yeah. That's really nice. And in Addis it's been raining of late again, so something warm that will make me remember Nairobi.
Nairobi is your other home.
It definitely is my other home. Thank you. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to be here and to see you.
Nice meeting you too.
Okay. Stay well.
You too.
Sure. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed watching the story of the youngest diplomat in the African Union Chairperson's cabinet. I'm particularly impressed by her work in advocating for education, climate change, and public health, besides other things. Thank you so much for watching Globe Traktion today. Join us again next Saturday at 8:30 p.m. for another inspiring story of people making global impact. Remember, if you got a story you'd like to share with us, don't hesitate. Write to us through globetraktion@standardmedia.co.ke or follow us and DM us on our social media platforms at KTN News or at Globe Traktion. You can also give me a follow on my social media platforms at Pasil Telewa on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok for more stories of what's happening across the globe. But until next time, I hope to catch up with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.